Welcome back to Threads of Truth, where real-life mysteries meet internet speculation.
Today, we are walking through one of the most unsettling types of vanishing cases. The one that happens not in the middle of the night on a lonely road, but right at home, in broad daylight, during a mundane, everyday chore.
Yeah, this is the story of Branson Perry.
And it's a story that really sticks with you.
Okay, let's unpack this. We're focusing today on a disappearance that's just defined by its central, eerie simplicity.
That's a perfect word for it. Simple.
You have a 20-year-old man, Branson Perry, who tells a friend he is simply going to return a pair of jumper cables to a shed right next to his house.
Right. He steps outside around 3 in the afternoon, April 11th, 2001.
And he vanishes completely. He's never seen again.
The whole setup, it just defies all logical expectation for foul play. I mean, this happened at his own home in Skidmore, Missouri.
And there were people right there.
At least 3 people nearby. His friend, Janet Crawford, was inside the house.
And outside.
2 mechanics actively working on a car right there on the property.
So you have multiple witnesses within, feet of him?
Exactly. And despite that proximity and the fact that it was the middle of the afternoon, absolutely no one reported seeing anything.
Or hearing anything.
Yeah.
No struggle, no cry for help.
Not even the sound of a vehicle speeding away. It's like he was just erased in seconds.
And we really can't examine this case without setting the stage in Skidmore.
No, you can't.
This is a tiny rural town, but it's one that already carried this significant, painful history of high-profile violent incidents.
And that local environment, it lends a specific, deeply uneasy context to Branson's disappearance, doesn't it?
It does. When silence falls in a place that's already known for violence, theories about, local secrets or a community culture of silence, they immediately feel heavier.
Almost pre-baked into the mystery itself.
So our goal today is to really examine the conflicting evidence around this. We've got sources from initial police reports, family statements,
all the way to later investigative leads that pivot from, maybe he just left due to stress, to the dominant theory today, a drug-related homicide with deep local roots.
And the central challenge as we explore this is just sifting through the noise generated by that impossible time window.
Those few seconds that just swallowed a 20-year-old man whole.
Let's start with Branson Perry himself. At 20 years old, sources paint a picture of a young man described as kind.
And also restless and somewhat private. He was living with his father, Bob Perry, at their home in Skidmore.
And the situation at home. It was already incredibly stressful leading up to that afternoon.
The context of the days right before he vanished is absolutely critical to understanding the tensions at play.
And this is a really tough detail.
It is. Just 4 days before April 11th, Branson reported a deeply traumatic event to his father. He claimed he had been drugged and then sexually assaulted or taken advantage of by a neighbor, a man named Jason Bierman.
That is just an immense weight of trauma for anyone to carry, let alone a young man.
And the sources are clear that this event, coupled with the resulting anger and a very strong, perhaps volatile reaction from his father, Bob.
It created this highly stressed and emotionally charged environment in the home.
The stress was multi-layered. On one hand, you have the profound psychological distress from that alleged assault.
Then on the other,
the relationship with his father was strained by this new crisis. And you have to remember, this is all compounded by the fact that Bob was just returning home from the hospital due to his own health issues.
So the atmosphere was a powder keg.
It was. And this stress alone, if we look at other missing persons cases, it could suggest a motive for an impulsive flight, right? A spontaneous need to just run from the pain.
But the way he vanished, the logistics of it, that doesn't seem to support him just running off.
Not at all. It's a major contradiction in the case.
We also have to acknowledge the elephant in the room regarding the investigation's focus, which is drug use.
Yes. There's a confirmed detail that Branson was struggling with the use of marijuana and amphetamines at the time.
And he was actually carrying a bottle of Valium the day he disappeared.
And this isn't just a personal detail. It's crucial because it connects him potentially to local drug networks, to debts, or to disputes.
Which becomes a major line of inquiry for the Nottoway County Sheriff's Office.
It becomes the major line of inquiry. That connection is key because in a small town, drug networks are often, insular and pretty unforgiving.
So if a personal trauma like the assault was already creating an unstable internal life.
Then you add the potential for outside conflict because of drug use, and his risk profile just goes through the roof. The investigators simply can't ignore the possibility that his drug connections provided the opportunity or maybe the motive for foul play.
So let's drill down into the timeline of that afternoon, April 11, 2001.
Okay. So Branson and his friend, Jenna Crawford, are at the house on West Oak Street.
And they were just cleaning, right? Getting the house in order for his dad's return.
Exactly. Preparing for Bob Perry's arrival home from the hospital. But the scene was busier than you might think.
How so?
Well, we know the two mechanics were outside, actively working on Bob's car.
Okay.
And on top of that, sources mention that two other men, who were still unidentified, reportedly visited the home briefly right before the disappearance.
And we have no idea who they were or why they were there.
Their interaction, their intentions, it all remains unclear. But it means that in that small window of time leading up to 3 p.m., there were at least 5 people, Branson, Jenna, the two mechanics, and these two visitors in or right around the property.
It's right around 3 p.m. when he says he's going to the shed.
Yes. He tells Jenna he needs to put a pair of jumper cables back in the adjacent shed, and he says he'll be back in a few minutes.
He just walks out the door.
And that, terrifyingly, is his final confirmed sighting.
We're stuck with this central, deeply frustrating fact of contradictory silence.
That's it. Jenna, who's inside, and the two mechanics outside working just a few feet away, they saw or heard nothing suspicious.
No shouting, no car doors slamming, no tires squealing.
No sound of a physical struggle whatsoever. It's a total void of information.
If you think about it purely logistically, for a person to be taken from a property in broad daylight with witnesses that close without any noise.
It suggests one of two highly specialized scenarios.
Okay, what's the first one?
The first is an incredibly fast, professional, and silent abduction, just executed with perfect timing, almost military precision.
Which seems unlikely for a random event.
Very unlikely. So the other scenario, and this is the one the evidence seems to lean toward, is that the foul play was committed by someone who was already accepted or integrated into that immediate space.
Someone Branson knew?
Someone Branson knew, or maybe someone the mechanics or Jenna wouldn't immediately see as a threat. Someone who could start a calm interaction that turned fatal quickly and silently.
The initial exchange had to seem routine.
It had to, otherwise someone would have noticed.
The aftermath is what really, I think, solidifies the case against him just leaving on his own.
Without a doubt. The next day, Branson's grandmother, Joanne Stinnett, finds the house unlocked and deserted.
And critically, all his personal belongings are there.
Everything. His wallet, all his money, and his vehicle all left behind.
If you're running from trauma or stress, you take your wallet. You take your money. It's the first logical step for survival.
Leaving them behind indicates he didn't plan to be gone permanently or even for very long.
Plus, we know Branson had actual concrete plans for the next day.
Right. People who are planning to vanish don't usually schedule appointments or make commitments for the future.
So you have the future plans and the abandoned necessities. The voluntary departure theory, it just becomes almost impossible to sustain, doesn't it?
It does, unless you assume some sort of massive, sudden mental break, which there's no evidence for.
And we should probably pause to address the complicated household dynamics, specifically the statements made by his father, Bob Perry.
Yes, because given the volatility around the assault allegation and Bob's health, early speculation naturally focused on the household itself.
That's standard procedure in any investigation, right? But look closest to home first.
Absolutely. And the sources confirm the high emotional stress, but they're also very clear that investigators found absolutely no evidence connecting his father to any foul play.
So Bob Perry cooperated with the investigation.
He did, and the investigation successfully cleared him. That allowed police to shift their focus outwards, specifically toward those drug-related leads that started to come up.
So, an environment of emotional turbulence, yes.
But the evidence didn't point toward criminal conspiracy within the immediate family.
Okay, let's move to the critical oddities.
Yeah.
The details that just actively frustrate any simple explanation. And the jumper cable mystery is maybe the most famous and, frankly, the most bizarre part of this story.
It truly is. It's the detail everyone latches onto.
So when police first searched the shed right after the disappearance, the very place he said he was going,
The jumper cables were not there.
they weren't there. Then about 2 weeks later,
They mysteriously reappear, placed just inside the shed door. This isn't just a detail, it's an investigative bomb.
That is a staggering logistical problem. Two possibilities come out of this, and they're both equally troubling.
Let's walk through them.
1. Branson himself returned briefly, somehow unnoticed, during those 2 weeks, to drop them off before vanishing again.
But wait, if that's the case, how did he get back to the home, access the shed, put the cables there, and leave again without being seen?
Especially with ongoing community searches and a police presence.
And how did he travel without his car or his money? The first possibility, as you highlight, it requires a level of stealth that seems, well, impossible.
So what's the second, more ominous possibility?
The one that investigators favor is that someone else returned to the property long after the initial crime to plant them, to tamper with the scene.
If that's the case, it suggests a perpetrator who had the audacity, the access, and maybe the need to try and clean up a minor loose end weeks later.
The mystery of the cables transforms from a simple item into a sign of criminal manipulation and maybe even continued surveillance of the scene.
We should also revisit the state of his car. It was left behind, low on gas.
But reinforcing the idea that he didn't drive away.
But the keys were missing. This small detail is also deeply problematic, isn't it?
It really is. If the keys were missing, were they taken by an abductor to stop Branson from driving away or to use the car themselves?
Or did they just fall out of his pocket during a sudden silent struggle we know nothing about?
The missing keys really complicate the idea that he might have just spontaneously hopped into a passing car, even one driven by someone he knew.
Right. If a perpetrator took the keys, it suggests a degree of premeditation or control.
The only thing we know for certain is that the physical evidence left behind argues forcefully against any kind of pre-planned departure.
And finally, regarding those early investigative leads, the immediate response was massive, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Ground searches, cadaver dogs, extensive community involvement were deployed right away. It shows how urgent the response was.
And yet,
Nothing. No usable evidence, no struggle marks, and no remains were ever discovered in the immediate area of the house. A complete blank.
we also have to mention the bizarre appearance of the serial killer, Joseph Paul Franklin.
Right, who claimed he was involved. Franklin was notorious for confessing to any high-profile crime he could insert himself into.
A murder groupie of sorts.
You could say that. And investigators, they quickly ruled his confession unreliable and completely unrelated to the facts of Branson's disappearance.
But it highlights a real logistical issue for law enforcement, doesn't it? The time and resources wasted vetting false leads from people seeking notoriety.
It pulls focus away from the critical local leads that might actually solve the case.
So when a case remains unsolved for decades, especially one with such strange, contradictory circumstances, broad daylight witnesses, yet total silence, the information vacuum is just. It's quickly filled by online speculation.
And the internet tries to connect dots in ways that authorities are often legally restricted from even discussing.
And so often, these online theories are heavily influenced by the background, the narrative of the location itself.
We see this so powerfully in the Skidmore context. The town's history becomes part of the mystery, not just the setting for it.
Before we get into the general online noise, we have to address the most compelling yet ultimately discredited outside lead that really captured national attention.
The Jack Wayne Rogers situation.
Yes. This case seemed for a time to provide the horrifying answer.
It did. Jack Wayne Rogers was, on the surface, respected in the community. He was a minister and a Boy Scout leader.
He was arrested in 2003, 2 years after Branson vanished, but for completely unconnected charges involving child pornography and assault.
Which confirmed he was a predatory individual at the very least.
The eerie connection came from the digital world. Authorities traced online chat logs to Rogers, where he vividly described abducting, raping, torturing, and murdering a blonde-haired hitchhiker from Skidmore.
And this description closely matched Branson's specific profile: 20 years old, blonde, male.
And the detail that made this circumstantial link so incredibly strong was the physical evidence found in Rogers' car,
A turtle claw necklace.
which was similar to one that Branson was known to own and wear.
For an individual to accurately describe the victim's appearance, the location, and then to possess a unique personal item, it moved the needle from mere fantasy to genuine investigative interest.
So if the description matched and he had a potentially relevant, unique personal item, what was it that convinced investigators he wasn't the killer? Why was this lead dismissed?
Rogers was convicted of the other disturbing charges, proving his dangerous nature, but he was never confirmed as Branson's killer.
What was the flaw?
The key forensic analysis revealed he was a fantasist who incorporated authentic, local details into his fictional narratives.
So he was basically using a real-life tragedy to make his dark fantasies seem more real.
Exactly. While the narrative was vivid and accurate to Branson's description, they lacked any hard evidence linking Rogers to the timeline or the specific location of the disappearance or any body disposal site.
That distinction between a disturbed person who tracks local horror and the actual perpetrator must be incredibly challenging for investigators.
They had to spend enormous time and resources confirming that Rogers wasn't the killer, even though he was a convicted predator. It was Branson's own mother, Patty, who confirmed her belief that Rogers had simply inserted himself into her son's story.
So, in the end, the compelling circumstantial link of the necklace and the description just couldn't overcome the total lack of physical proof.
Correct. So let's turn to the broader spectrum of theories that you see online. The Skidmore curse theory is pervasive in forums.
Right. Because the town has seen several tragic, high-profile, violent incidents, the narrative becomes one of this generalized endemic danger.
It suggests maybe a massive unchecked criminal element or some kind of organization, and that narrative absolutely influences public perception.
It leads to theories that are often exaggerated or fear-based, right?
Absolutely. When people talk about Skidmore, they often reference other tragic events, creating the sense that the community is either inherently evil or is hiding something enormous.
But it's important to separate local history, which can foster a culture of silence, from actual factual evidence of some organized crime ring.
That's the key distinction. The sources don't support the idea that Branson's disappearance was just part of some inevitable town-wide curse.
Okay, so the most immediate theory, given the location, is foul play by someone known or just opportunistic violence.
This suggests that maybe one of the unidentified visitors to the house that day, or just someone who saw Branson step outside, committed the act spontaneously.
It's a plausible path, but it immediately runs headfirst into our central dilemma.
The lack of struggle or noise.
Exactly. For an opportunistic act to happen so silently and efficiently, it requires one of two things.
Either incredibly fast, lethal, quiet violence, or that the victim was subdued immediately by surprise, perhaps chemically, which, links back to the drug culture contacts he reportedly had.
If it was opportunistic violence, the perpetrator had to be shockingly effective and lucky to avoid the mechanic's notice.
The odds are against it.
Then there's the voluntary disappearance theory. We touched on this. The idea that he ran because of the immense stress from the assault or his home life.
And we have to reiterate the powerful counterpoint. He left everything behind: wallet, money, car, future plans.
If the goal was to escape, he failed to take the basic tools for survival.
This theory remains mathematically difficult to support based on the physical evidence, especially the missing car keys, which complicates any idea of a quick escape.
What about abduction by a passing stranger? It's always discussed.
But the lack of witnesses or vehicles reported makes this incredibly difficult to support. You have mechanics right there working. How fast does a car have to stop, someone grab another person, subdue them, and drive away without a single mechanic noticing the event or the vehicle?
It requires almost supernatural skill.
For a highly personalized, calculated abduction. Which brings us back to the official investigative theory.
The one that the current investigation deems the most likely scenario.
The dominant investigative theory. Drug-related homicide.
This has been the consistent focus of the Nottoway County Sheriff's Office for years now.
They believe Branson was murdered by a group of individuals he knew, likely connected to the local drug culture.
And the motive could be anything from a debt, a conflict,
or perhaps information he possessed related to the assault and whatever happened after that.
What makes this theory so compelling is that it comes with a specific, documented lead that moves the timeline of the crime away from the shed
and into the realm of an organized cover-up. We have to discuss the lead involving the house near Quitman, Missouri.
This is the critical turning point in the investigation, isn't it?
It is. A reliable witness reportedly claimed to have seen Branson at a drug-related house near Quitman after April 11th.
So after he vanished from his home.
Yes. If that's true, it means he was alive for several hours or even days post-vanishing. It means the incident at the shed was not immediate foul play, but an abduction or a forced trip away from Skidmore.
And the chilling follow-up is the key part.
This house mysteriously burned down less than a week after Branson vanished, potentially destroying any crucial evidence of his presence or what his killers did there.
A house burning down shortly after a key lead is identified. That looks an awful lot like evidence tampering and cleanup.
It fundamentally changes the nature of the crime. It supports the idea that this was not a spontaneous act of violence, but a crime that was quickly and methodically covered up by individuals operating together.
Precisely. If that fire was arson, and investigators strongly suspect it was, it demonstrates a level of coordination, ruthlessness, and planning that points directly toward a planned drug-related execution and cover-up.
It shifts the entire focus from what happened at the shed to what happened after he was taken from the shed. It suggests the perpetrators felt confident enough to return to a crime scene or a holding location and destroy evidence.
Knowing that the culture of silence would protect them.
Exactly.
Let's revisit the jumper cable puzzle in this new light, because it might tie into this coordinated cleanup effort.
If the drug homicide theory involving a coordinated group is correct, the return of the jumper cables implies one of two things related to scene control.
Okay.
One, the individuals responsible realized they had missed a minor detail. The cables are a mundane item that shouldn't be missing, so they returned to the property undercover to place them back, trying to normalize the scene.
To make it look like Branson had completed his task, thus leading investigators astray.
It implies an extraordinary level of cold calculation. To risk returning to a property 2 weeks after a disappearance, knowing police had been there, just to place an ordinary item.
That's the definition of audacity.
The alternative interpretation that the discovery of the cables 2 weeks later was unrelated and just an artifact of the scene not properly logged by police initially is possible, but far less likely given how iconic this detail has become.
So scene manipulation is the more unsettling and maybe more likely explanation.
It suggests sustained access and control by the perpetrators over the environment long after the abduction itself.
So, after exploring all the evidence and the conflicting theories, what have we learned about this almost impossible disappearance?
The primary baffling element remains that unusually small disappearance, window minutes, maybe seconds in broad daylight, with witnesses present who saw nothing.
It forces us to synthesize the evidence. The act was either carried out by someone incredibly subtle and swift,
Or someone who was not perceived as a threat by the witnesses. Potentially someone who was already present, accepted, or connected to the house. The silence dictates the entire analysis.
and because there are no vehicle sightings, no physical evidence of a struggle from the initial scene, the limits of verification for theories involving strangers are just immense.
It becomes incredibly difficult to prove an abduction by a passing stranger, which is why the investigation pivoted so hard toward local connections.
The strength of the drug homicide theory, supported by that Quitman fire lead, is that it directly addresses the logistics of the silence.
It does. If Branson knew his abductors, or if they were able to subdue him quickly with minimal force, the silence becomes explainable.
And the systematic nature of the cover-up burning the Quitman house, potentially planting the cables, it points away from random crime.
It points toward individuals trying to protect their operation.
We have to acknowledge the context of Skidmore here. The town's reputation and history certainly influence online theories, but the official view seems to align with the darkest local possibilities.
That's right. The official stance of the Nottoway County Sheriff's Office is that foul play is the most likely scenario, linked directly to that drug homicide theory and the belief that he was killed by a group he knew.
They seem confident in their working hypothesis.
They do, based on the accumulation of circumstantial and witness-provided details over the years.
Which brings us to the most painful reality of this case and the critical barrier to justice.
Yes. Authorities have publicly announced that they have identified a suspect, or suspects in this case. They believe they know who is responsible for Branson Perry's death.
Right.
But they lack the necessary evidence for a successful prosecution, namely the body.
In Missouri, like in many jurisdictions, securing a murder conviction without a body is exponentially harder, isn't it?
It is. You need irrefutable corroborating evidence that proves the crime occurred. That often requires a confession or multiple cooperating eyewitnesses. This is the crucial missing link that stalls justice for Branson Perry.
And the investigators are very clear about why they can't move forward, even with suspects identified.
The culture of silence within that small community is the biggest obstacle to solving the case.
This is more than just a phrase, isn't it? It's a criminal shield.
It is. When witnesses or individuals with knowledge are too afraid or too loyal to speak, a case, even one with identified suspects, becomes impossible to close.
It's a phenomenon common in small, tightly knit communities.
Where the social and physical consequences of breaking that silence can feel more immediate and terrifying than facing the justice system, the code of silence protects the perpetrators.
It's just a heavy thought that the truth of how Branson Perry vanished and where his remains are is likely known by multiple people in that area.
But the code of silence is more powerful than the desire for justice for his family. The threads are there, but the fear is too great to pull them.
And that enduring silence means the family continues to carry this emotional weight. They wait for answers more than 2 decades later.
Answers that are hidden not by a lack of investigation, but by the unwillingness of certain people to break that code. It's a tragedy layered on top of a mystery, showing the immense power that local community dynamics hold over justice.
This case is a horrifying reminder of how suddenly life can be disrupted during the most mundane act, a walk to the shed. It underscores how critical local knowledge and the courage to share it can be to unlocking major cold cases that seem otherwise physically impossible.
The threads of truth are still there, waiting to be pulled.
Absolutely. The silence in Skidmore speaks volumes.
But the flames of the Quitman fire might tell the true story of coordination and motive.
Next time on Threads of Truth, we examine the heartbreaking cold case of Tammy Jo Alexander, the unidentified girl known for decades only as Jane Doe, and the journey that finally brought her name home.